When my daughter told me I was not invited to Thanksgiving, the words landed heavier than any insult. I had paid for her house, her car, her credit cards, even her son's tuition. All the while she smiled at me like I was a burden. That night, I drove home in silence, and by morning, I began quietly shutting off every payment they relied on. They thought excluding me was easy. They had no idea what real consequences looked like. Before we continue, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if your own child cut you off from the family table after everything you had sacrificed for them? The first time my daughter told me I was not welcome at Thanksgiving, I thought I had misheard her. The kitchen where she stood was warm with the smell of cinnamon and fresh coffee, the kind of scent Maria, my late wife, used to love during the holidays. But the words coming out of Emily's mouth were colder than the November air outside. She had her arms folded tight against her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor tiles instead of on me, and her voice carried the rehearsed sharpness of someone trying to make rejection sound like practicality. Dad, we are keeping it smaller this year. Just immediate family, she said. And though she spoke softly, the sentence cut me deeper than any scream could have. Jason, her husband, leaned against the refrigerator, sipping from a mug with a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth as if the whole thing amused him. He was never subtle, not when it came to showing me where I stood. "You know how it is, Dennis," he said casually, as though I were some neighbor being excused from a block party instead of the father who had bankrolled half his life. "We are trying to keep it simple. No extra people. Just us, the kids, and my parents." He let the word linger. His parents were welcome, but I was an extra person. For a moment I stood frozen, staring around their kitchen at all the things my sacrifices had paid for. The new refrigerator gleaming in stainless steel, the granite counters that Emily had insisted on after seeing them in a magazine, the refinished hardwood floor that had taken 3 months of my retirement checks to cover. Every surface in that room carried my fingerprints, even if my name had been erased from the story they told their friends. I thought of the checks I had written without hesitation, the hours of overtime I had put in years ago so they could live in this comfort. And I realized none of it had bought me a seat at their table. "Smaller?" I finally asked, my voice steady though my chest ached. "I thought I was immediate family." Emily shifted uneasily, finally looking up at me with eyes that carried a flicker of guilt before hardening again. "Dad, please do not make this harder. The kids want something different this year, and with Jason's parents flying in, it just makes sense. You can come by another time, maybe the weekend after." Her words were polite on the surface, but the message was as clear as day. She wanted a holiday without me. Jason straightened, his grin sharpening. "You have done plenty already, Dennis. We appreciate it. But we are adults now. We can handle things on our own." Handle things on their own. That was rich. Without me, they would have drowned years ago. The mortgage payment that went out of my account every single month, the car insurance I had been covering since Emily wrecked her first vehicle, the tuition for my grandson's college, the credit card account that kept their lifestyle afloat whenever Jason overspent. None of that counted, apparently. They spoke as though they were independent, as though I were some clingy relic who refused to let go, when in reality, I had been the one quietly holding their world together. I swallowed hard, looking at my daughter as if I were seeing her for the first time. The little girl who used to slip her small hand into mine during grocery runs, tugging me toward the shelves where the cranberry sauce sat. The one who used to beam when Maria brought out her famous sweet potato casserole, was gone. In her place stood a woman, who now saw me as an inconvenience. My throat tightened as I asked, "Where am I supposed to go for Thanksgiving, Emily?" She glanced at Jason, then back at me, her tone clipped. "Maybe Aunt Karen's, or you can spend it with friends. It is not a big deal." Not a big deal. Thanksgiving had never been just a meal to me. It was Maria's holiday, the one she poured her heart into, the one that had always centered our family around gratitude and sacrifice. We had built our traditions together, and Emily had grown up in the glow of them. Now she dismissed it as nothing. Jason clapped his hands once, already turning toward the fridge again. "So it is settled. We will see you sometime next week. Maybe leftovers, huh?" He chuckled at his own joke, a sound that echoed with smug satisfaction. I did not laugh. I did not speak. I simply nodded once and turned away, each step heavier than the last. As I walked down their hallway, I passed the framed photos lining the walls. In the older ones, I stood proudly with my arm around Maria and Emily, sitting on my shoulders, her hair in little braids, her smile wide. In the newer ones, my face grew smaller, sometimes cropped at the edge, sometimes missing entirely. Even the walls told me I was fading from their lives. The front door clicked behind me, and the chill of late November swept over my skin like a punishment. I paused in the driveway, staring at their two-story home, solid and bright under the cloudy sky. The house stood as a monument to my sacrifices, yet I realized in that moment that I was no more welcome inside it than a stranger passing on the street. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of movement. Emily setting mugs on the counter, Jason pulling out his phone. Laughter followed me as I climbed into my truck, laughter that sounded like nails being hammered into the coffin of what I used to believe was family. The drive home was quiet, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles burned. Leaves swirled across the road, the last bright colors of autumn mocking the darkness in my chest. By the time I pulled into my own cracked driveway, the humiliation had hardened into something colder. Inside, the silence of my house pressed down on me. The faint smell of Maria's old candles still lingered, but instead of comfort, it felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. I tossed my keys on the counter and walked straight to my study. Against the far wall stood the heavy oak filing cabinet, scarred with age, but filled with the documents of a lifetime. My hands were steady as I pulled it open and began stacking folders onto my desk. Bank statements spilled across the wood, lines of numbers that told the story of my servitude. Loan documents, insurance policies, receipts for tuition checks, credit card bills. All of it lay there like evidence in a trial where I was both victim and fool. Each page reminded me of another sacrifice, another piece of myself I had given away without hesitation. The total stretched far beyond money. It was years of work, years of belief that family meant giving without expecting repayment. I stood there staring down at the mountain of paper, the numbers blurring into a single truth. They had not only used me, they had erased me. They enjoyed the fruits of my labor, yet treated me as though I were disposable. My breath came slow and deliberate as I reached for the most recent bank statement, my finger tracing a familiar line item. Mortgage auto payment, $2,200. I had been covering it for 4 years. Without that, their castle of comfort would crumble fast. I leaned back in my chair, my lips curling into something that might have been the first true smile in months. For the first time, I considered what life would look like if I simply stopped. No warning, no fight, no begging them to include me. Just silence on my end and chaos on theirs. My eyes swept across the spread of documents, insurance policies, tuition receipts, credit card accounts, all the strings that connected me to their lives. With one phone call, with a few signatures, I could cut every single one. They thought Thanksgiving would be easier without me. I would show them what life really looked like without me. I whispered into the empty room, the words steady and cold, and they tasted better than any turkey or pie ever had. Let's see how they like living without me. That night I did not sleep. I sat at my desk with the folders spread around me, my reading lamp throwing pale light across the evidence of my own foolish devotion. The numbers stared back like scars. 4 years of mortgage payments. Every one of them pulled straight from my account. Hundreds of dollars poured into car insurance for a vehicle I did not drive, tuition bills covered without hesitation so my grandson could walk into his classes without knowing his parents were broke. Even the credit card charges, small and petty at times, bore my fingerprints. Groceries, gas, weekend trips they never invited me on. Each line item mocked me, and the longer I stared at them, the more I realized I had spent the last decade living as a ghost in my own family's life, present only when my money was needed. Memories flooded me, not as comfort, but as sharp reminders of the pattern I had allowed. I thought back to the spring when Jason lost his job. He had stormed into my house, slamming his fist on the table, declaring the company had treated him unfairly. Emily sat beside him in tears, wringing her hands, her voice trembling as she said they might lose the house. I had already been paying part of their mortgage. But that night, I promised to cover all of it until Jason got back on his feet. I remember him looking up at me with a smile that was all charm, thanking me like a man who had just secured an investment, not a lifeline. Months passed. Jason found another job, but the payments never came back into his hands. They stayed in mine. I thought of Emily's phone call 2 winters ago, the one that came in the middle of a snowstorm. Her car had broken down on the freeway, the insurance had lapsed, and Jason's credit was maxed. "Dad, please," she had whispered through the crackle of her cell phone. "We cannot afford this right now. Can you just put it on your account for a little while?" I had agreed without hesitation, driving out in the snow myself to meet her and pay the tow truck driver. That was when I added her car insurance to my list of automatic payments, telling myself it was temporary, just until they could handle it again. But temporary turned into years. Then there was the tuition bill, the one that nearly drained what was left of Maria's savings. My grandson had been accepted into a college across the state, and when the first semester bill came, Jason and Emily had called me late at night, both speaking at once, their voices urgent. "He deserves the best education," Emily said. "We will pay you back," Jason promised. I had transferred the funds the next morning. Years later, not 1 cent had come back. Every sacrifice had been wrapped in promises. Every promise had dissolved into silence. And still I gave, because I told myself family meant never letting them fall. I thought I was doing the right thing. But what had I really created? A daughter who looked me in the eye and called me an extra guest. A son-in-law who spoke as if my presence were a burden. A family that sat comfortably at a table I had paid for, planning a Thanksgiving feast without me, secure in the belief that my money would flow forever. As the clock on the wall ticked past midnight, a strange calm came over me. The anger was still there, but beneath it was something steadier, something almost peaceful. For the first time in years, I was not thinking about how to save them. I was thinking about how to save myself. I picked up the bank statement again, my finger pressing against the familiar transfer. Mortgage auto payment, $2,200. Due every month on the 15th. Without fail, it left my account like clockwork. Without fail, it kept their roof secure and their life stable. What would happen if, just once, it did not arrive? The idea filled me with a quiet thrill. I set the statement down, picked up the phone, and dialed the number printed at the top of the page. The automated voice offered me options, its tone almost cheerful. To cancel or change automatic transfers, press 3. My finger hovered, then pressed firmly. A few minutes later, a human voice came on the line, a young woman who asked for my account number and verification. She spoke quickly, professionally, with no judgment at all. "Yes, sir, I see the automatic transfer," she said after typing. $2,200 each month to Wells Fargo, account ending in 7489. You want to cancel effective immediately? I glanced around my study. The walls needed paint. The windows leaked cold air every winter because I had spent my repair money keeping Emily's house pristine. My own refrigerator groaned every time it cycled on. My own car had not been new in 15 years. Every corner of my life showed the wear of sacrifice, and yet they had dismissed me like I was nothing. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Effective immediately." "Done," she replied. "The transfer has been canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with?" I almost laughed. The question felt heavier than she intended. Was there anything else she could help me with? No, she had already helped more than she knew. "That is all," I answered. When I hung up, the silence in the house was different. It was no longer the silence of loneliness, but the silence of freedom. For the first time in years, the coming month's budget would not bleed into their lives. For the first time since Maria passed, I felt like I had taken back something that belonged to me. I gathered the stack of statements and pushed them into a neat pile, then leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling with a strange sense of relief. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The late autumn sun crept weakly through the curtains, and I brewed a pot of strong coffee, the good kind I usually avoided because it cost more. I sat at the table, sipping slowly, tasting the difference between duty and choice. My phone buzzed once, twice, then again. I ignored it. When I finally picked it up, there were 3 missed calls from Emily. I set it back down and poured myself another cup. Across town, I could imagine Jason logging into his bank account, frowning as the mortgage payment failed to appear. I could picture Emily pacing the kitchen, her voice sharp, asking him if he had done something wrong. I could see Jason's temper rising as he called the bank, demanding answers. By noon, another message appeared on my phone, this one from Jason. His words were short and angry. "Dennis, the mortgage payment is missing. Call me now." I smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of a long-delayed satisfaction. They were finally beginning to understand what my absence really meant. The first domino had fallen. That evening, as I sat down to a simple meal of roast chicken and potatoes, my phone rang again. Jason's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. A minute later, another message appeared, this one less controlled than before. "Did you cancel it? Tell me you did not cancel it." The words on the screen glowed like fire. They had not expected me to fight back. They had not even considered the possibility. To them, I was permanent, predictable, as reliable as the bills that got paid every month. But I had just rewritten the rules, and as I set my phone face down on the table, a sharp, satisfying sound filled the quiet room. The familiar beep of a declined credit card echoing from Jason's end, captured in the angry voicemail he had left. I listened to that voicemail twice, leaning back in my chair with the phone pressed against my ear, letting the fury in his voice roll over me like a storm I no longer had to fear. His tone was panicked beneath the anger, a man unaccustomed to being told no, unaccustomed to the world saying, "You cannot." For years I had shielded him and Emily from those kinds of walls, smoothing over every obstacle, paying every bill, covering every mistake. Now, with one quiet phone call to the bank, I had forced him to meet reality head-on, and it was beautiful. But this was only the beginning. A single canceled mortgage payment was a tremor, a crack in the ground. I wanted an earthquake. I wanted the ground beneath their feet to open wide, so they could feel the depth of my absence in every corner of their carefully curated lives. I reached for another folder on my desk, this one thinner, but just as telling. Inside was the paperwork for the auto insurance account I had been covering. Emily's car, Jason's SUV, both registered under their names. But the monthly bill had come through me for years. It had started with a late payment, an emergency, a promise of reimbursement that never materialized. I had set it up on my account because I told myself it was easier, and in truth, I had wanted to believe they would eventually take it back. They never did. Every month, the payment slipped quietly from my pocket into theirs, unnoticed, unthanked, forgotten. I dialed the insurance company. The representative's voice was polite, routine. She asked if I wished to continue coverage. "No," I said firmly. "Cancel both vehicles, effective immediately." My tone was calm, deliberate, not the voice of a man making a rash decision, but of someone who had weighed his choice and found it long overdue. She hesitated, reading the names on the account. "Sir, just to be clear, you understand this means the drivers will have no coverage as of tonight?" "I understand," I replied. "That is the point." When I ended the call, a strange lightness filled me. I pictured Jason climbing into his SUV, his chest puffed with the false pride of a man who believed everything was secure. He would not know it yet. But at that very moment, the safety net he had taken for granted was gone. One accident, one traffic stop, and he would learn just how much he had relied on me. The next file I opened nearly made my chest tighten, not with regret, but with the weight of memory. Tuition statements. My grandson's college. I had been proud when the acceptance letter came. Proud when Emily called me crying with joy. "Dad, he is going to make something of himself," she had said. I had transferred thousands without hesitation, telling myself that this was what grandfathers were supposed to do. I wanted that boy to have a future better than the one I had scraped together for Emily. But I realized now that my generosity had only taught him and his parents one thing: that Grandpa would always pay. That lesson ended today. I called the university's bursar's office, the number already memorized from years of transactions. After a few minutes on hold, I gave my information and said the words that felt both bitter and liberating. I will no longer be responsible for this account. Please send all future correspondence directly to his parents. There was a pause. The clerk on the other end asked politely if I was certain, if I wanted to set up another method of payment. "No," I said again. "It is their responsibility now." When I hung up, I imagined Emily receiving the notice in the mail, the shock in her eyes as she realized that her son's education, once guaranteed, now depended on her and Jason alone. No quiet safety net, no easy bailout, only reality staring back at them. By evening, I turned my attention to the credit cards. For years, I had carried a joint account, originally set up in case Emily ever faced an emergency. That emergency had somehow stretched into dinners, vacations, shopping trips. Every month I had told myself I would close it, and every month I let guilt keep it open. Tonight, guilt was gone. I called the bank, my voice steady as I explained that I wanted the account closed entirely. The representative asked if I wished to keep my portion active. I thought for a moment, then said no. Better to cut every tie. Let them face their world without a penny of mine propping it up. When I set the phone down, the silence of my house was louder than any Thanksgiving gathering could have been. For the first time in years, I felt control returning to me. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming the life I had given away. The phone on my desk lit up again, this time with Emily's name. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A moment later, her voice filled the room, brittle and trembling beneath her anger. "Dad, what is going on? Jason says the mortgage payment never came through, and now the credit card is not working. Tell me you did not do this. Please call me back." Her words were desperate, yet still carried the arrogance of someone who believed they were owed an explanation. I stared at the phone, my lips tightening into a grim line. For years she had ignored my voice, dismissed my concerns, treated me like an afterthought. Now she wanted answers. The phone rang again, then again, each call sharper, more frantic. Finally, I picked it up and held it to my ear, saying nothing. Emily's voice burst through at once. "Dad, tell me you did not cancel everything. The mortgage, the insurance, the cards. Jason says tuition payments have stopped too. Did you do this?" I remained silent for a moment, letting her panic stretch out until she demanded again, louder this time, her voice cracking. "Dad, answer me right now. Did you do this?" Her voice echoed in my ear, trembling with a mix of fear and fury. But I let the silence sit there between us like a wall. I wanted her to hear it, to feel the weight of it, to know that the man she had dismissed from Thanksgiving dinner could also dismiss himself from every financial chain that bound me to their lives. When I finally spoke, my tone was calm, steady, deliberate. "I do not owe you an explanation, Emily." She inhaled sharply on the other end. "What do you mean you do not owe me an explanation? Dad, you cannot just cut us off like this. Do you realize what this does to us? The mortgage, the credit cards, the tuition. It is all tied to you. You cannot just walk away." Her words made me laugh, quietly, though there was no humor in it. "Emily," I said, "do you hear yourself? You are listing every bill, every responsibility that belongs to you and Jason, and telling me I cannot stop paying them. Do you not see how backwards that is?" Jason's voice suddenly cut into the call, loud and unrestrained, as if he had snatched the phone from her hand. "Dennis, you listen to me. You think you are being smart right now, but you are about to ruin everything for your own grandson. You are going to ruin his education, his future, just because your feelings are hurt over Thanksgiving. Grow up." I leaned back in my chair and let him bark, his words spitting through the line like venom. When he paused, waiting for my reply, I spoke evenly. "Jason, I have been paying for your future, Emily's future, my grandson's future. For years. What have you been doing? Drinking from the tap without ever once thinking about the well. Now the well has gone dry. You will have to learn to find water on your own." There was a long silence, then the unmistakable sound of Emily crying in the background, her voice muffled. Jason cursed under his breath and hung up without another word. For the next 2 days, my phone was a storm. Texts, missed calls, voicemails that swung from pleading to threats to manipulative apologies. Dad, please, you know we cannot make the payments right now. Then an hour later, if you do not fix this, you will lose us forever. Jason's voice appeared in the mix too, sharper, colder. This is not over. You are going to regret humiliating us like this. I played them all once, then deleted them one by one, until my inbox was clean and my house was quiet again. Thanksgiving morning dawned bright and cold. I woke early, brewed a pot of strong coffee, and watched the frost glitter on the edges of my yard. For the first time in years, I had no holiday preparations to rush through, no frantic shopping lists, no panicked calls from Emily about last-minute expenses. My table was bare except for my mug, but there was a strange peace in that emptiness. Across town, I knew chaos was building. By late morning, I pictured Jason pacing their kitchen, shouting at Emily about bills he could not pay. Guests were due to arrive soon, extended family and friends, people they had invited to show off their perfect home and their perfect holiday spread. They would expect warmth, abundance, stability. Instead, Emily and Jason were scrambling to keep the facade from crumbling. At noon, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Emily. Her words came in a rush, as if written with shaking hands. Dad, people are coming over. The food is ready, the house is decorated, but we cannot cover everything without you. Please, just for today, can you reinstate the payments? Just until after the holiday? I am begging you. I read the message twice, then set the phone down and poured another cup of coffee. The quiet of my kitchen felt richer than any feast. They wanted me to rescue them one more time, to put the mask back in place so their guests would never see the cracks. But that was exactly the point. I wanted the cracks exposed, the illusions shattered, the truth laid bare. Afternoon settled in, and with it came the sharp edge of anticipation. I imagined the scene playing out, Emily smiling too brightly as she opened the door to her guests, Jason forcing jokes while sweat lined his brow. They would try to pretend everything was fine. But I knew reality had teeth, and reality was about to bite. Around 4 o'clock, while I sat with a plate of leftover roast chicken and mashed potatoes, my phone lit again. Not a call this time, but a photo sent by one of my cousins who had been invited to their dinner. The picture showed Jason at the head of the table, carving a turkey with a strained grin while Emily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. In the background, the tension was almost visible, the smiles of the guests tight, their glances wary. Beneath the photo, my cousin had typed a simple message. Something feels off here. Are you coming later? I smiled faintly and set the phone aside. I did not need to come. My absence was already the loudest presence in that house. At 6 o'clock, the first real crack appeared. My cousin texted again, this time in a rush. Dennis, you will not believe this. Jason's card was declined at the grocery store this morning, and the delivery guy showed up at dinner demanding payment for a bill. In front of everyone. Emily looked like she was about to faint. I could almost hear the murmurs around the table, the whispers beginning to spread. Guests exchanging glances, wondering why the perfect couple was fumbling with money in the middle of their holiday. Shame was a dish Jason and Emily had never tasted before, but now it was being served alongside their turkey. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment from afar. I had not raised my voice, I had not confronted them publicly, I had simply withdrawn. And yet the impact was louder than any argument. But the night had one more card to play. At 7:30, as the darkness settled thick outside and families everywhere were digging into pie, my cousin's final message arrived. It was only 3 words, but they painted the picture clearly. Repo truck's here. I stared at the 3 words glowing on my phone, and though I was alone in my kitchen, I could almost hear the collective gasp rising across town from Emily's driveway. I imagined the sharp squeal of heavy brakes as the tow truck rumbled to a stop, the clanking of chains, the heavy boots of men who did not care about family gatherings or reputations, only about contracts and unpaid bills. While my cousins and neighbors passed plates of pumpkin pie, my daughter's perfect Thanksgiving table had just been overturned by reality itself. I set my fork down and closed my eyes, picturing the scene. Jason's black SUV, the pride of his chest-puffing bravado, gleaming in the driveway with its freshly washed hood, was now being hooked by a steel arm and dragged up onto a flatbed. Guests peered out the windows, some whispering, some pulling out phones, while Jason charged outside, red-faced and shouting, his voice carrying down the street for everyone to hear. He was the kind of man who always believed volume could replace substance. And now he was learning how powerless noise really was against steel chains and a signature on a repossession order. Inside, Emily must have been frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table, her face pale as her carefully constructed life unraveled in front of the people she most wanted to impress. I could see the relatives exchanging uncomfortable glances, the friends from Jason's office whispering behind their napkins. They had come expecting abundance, but what they saw was collapse. My cousin's messages came in rapid bursts, each one sharper than the last. Jason is screaming at the driver. The guy does not care. A few minutes later, Emily is crying in the kitchen. Guests are leaving already. Then finally, the one that made me chuckle aloud, alone in my empty house. Jason tried to block the truck with his body. They moved him aside like he was nothing. For years I had been the invisible force that kept their life stitched together. Now I had pulled out the thread, and the fabric was coming apart in plain view. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the bitterness roll over my tongue, a taste that matched the satisfaction in my chest. I had not raised my hand against them, had not uttered a curse, had not even needed to step foot on their property. I had simply stopped paying, and the silence of my absence was louder than any argument I could have delivered. By 8 o'clock, the calls began again. Emily's voice, broken now, not sharp with anger, but choked with panic. "Dad, please call me back. Please. They took the car. Everyone saw. Do you have any idea what you have done to us?" She left 3 messages like that in a row, each one more desperate, as if sheer repetition would summon me back into the role I had abandoned. Jason's message came next, filled with rage, every word spat like a blade. "You think this is funny? You think humiliating us on Thanksgiving makes you a man? You are nothing but a bitter old fool. You are done with us. Do you hear me? Done." His words did not sting. They rolled off me like water against stone. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. Thanksgiving night stretched on, quiet in my own home. I had reheated a slice of apple pie I bought from a small bakery down the road, eating it slowly at my table while the sounds of chaos surely echoed through my daughter's neighborhood. Across town, Emily and Jason were watching the empire they had built on my back collapse in front of their friends and family. Across town, whispers were spreading, reputations were crumbling, and their illusion of independence was gone forever. It struck me then how strange the contrast was. In their house, chaos. In mine, peace. In theirs, shame and noise. In mine, stillness and freedom. For years I had believed that by pouring myself into their lives, I was securing family. In truth, I had been trading peace for chains. Now, with those chains cut, I was free to breathe again. I turned off the lights around 10 and prepared for bed. But the knocking started before I could settle under the covers. Heavy, frantic pounding at the door that rattled the glass. I stood in the dark for a moment, listening, knowing who it was before I even moved. "Dad!" Emily's voice cracked through the night air, muffled by the door but unmistakable. "Dad, please open up. We need to talk, please." Her fists hammered again, desperate, raw, a rhythm of fear rather than anger now. I walked slowly to the door, my footsteps steady, my chest calm. Through the window, I could see her standing there. Hair disheveled, mascara streaked down her cheeks, her eyes wild with panic. The confident woman who had stood in her own kitchen days earlier and told me I was not welcome at Thanksgiving had been replaced by a daughter on the edge of collapse. I did not open the door yet. I stood in the shadows, watching her cry on my porch, her voice breaking as she begged. "Dad, I am sorry. I should not have said what I said. Please, we are losing everything. Jason's car, the mortgage, the tuition. We cannot fix this without you. Please, Dad, I am begging you." Her words filled the silence of my house, and for the first time in years, I realized I was not the one who needed to beg anymore. I let her cry for a long moment before I finally unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see her clearly in the porch light. Emily's face was a wreck of smeared makeup, her eyes swollen and desperate. The woman who had stood so firm in telling me I was not welcome at her table now stood shivering in the cold, clutching her coat around her shoulders like it could shield her from the storm she had unleashed. Behind her, headlights cut through the darkness as Jason's car pulled up. The replacement vehicle he drove tonight was not the gleaming SUV, but an old sedan borrowed from a neighbor, its muffler rattling like a broken drum. Jason climbed out, his movements sharp with anger. He slammed the door and marched up my driveway, his finger already pointed at me before he even reached the steps. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked, his voice carrying through the night. "Do you have any idea what you have done to us? Do you have any idea how humiliating tonight was?" I stepped aside and let them both in, not because I pitied them, but because I wanted this conversation to happen on my terms, under my roof, where the walls carried my silence and not their noise. Emily rushed into the living room, her words tumbling out in a stream. "Dad, please, we are in trouble. Jason's car is gone, the bank is calling about the mortgage, the credit cards are all frozen, and now the tuition office is threatening to block our son from enrolling next semester. Please, Dad, you have to help us fix this." Jason cut in sharply, his voice louder than hers. "No, Dennis, you do not have to fix this. You will fix this. You owe it to Emily, to your grandson. You cannot just cut us off because you are bitter. You think this makes you strong? All it makes you is pathetic. You are punishing your own family because you did not get a seat at a dinner table." I sat down in my armchair slowly, deliberately, and folded my hands on my lap. The lamp beside me cast a warm glow, and in that light, I felt like a judge seated above a courtroom, watching the guilty squirm before me. For years they had spoken as though I were a background character in their story. Now they were forced to stand center stage in mine. "Jason," I said evenly, "sit down." He opened his mouth to argue, but the steel in my tone made him pause. Emily tugged his sleeve, urging him to listen. They sat together on the couch, tense and bristling, while I leaned forward and slid a stack of folders onto the coffee table. Bank statements, loan documents, tuition receipts, insurance policies, the evidence of every sacrifice I had made. "Look at them," I said, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Every payment, every bill, every rescue, years of my life poured into your comfort. You have called me bitter, pathetic, a burden. But tell me, who has been carrying whom? Who has been the real provider in your family? Was it Jason, with his swagger and his borrowed charm? Was it Emily, with her cold dismissal of the man who kept her safe? Number it was me, always me. And now that I am gone, the house you built on my back is collapsing. Emily's eyes filled again, tears spilling down her cheeks as she reached toward the papers. Dad, please. I know you have done so much. I should not have said what I said. I should not have shut you out. Please, I am begging you, do not take it all away. Jason shook his head, his face twisted with rage. You are not some saint, Dennis. You wanted control, that is all. You paid for things so you could hold them over us, so you could pretend you were the hero. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. You ruined Thanksgiving, you ruined our reputation, and you are ruining your grandson's future. You should be ashamed. His words might have landed once. They might have stung, might have made me back down, reopen my wallet, and patch up their lives again. But tonight, they slid off me like water. I reached for one of the statements and held it up. $2,200, I said. Every month, without fail, for 4 years. That is over $100,000 just for your roof. Add in the cars, the tuition, the credit cards. Hundreds of thousands more. And not once, Jason. Not once did you say thank you. Not once did you treat me as anything other than your safety net. You call me controlling, but the truth is you have been dependent. Without me, you are nothing but bills you cannot pay. The room went quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Emily pressed her hands to her face, sobbing, while Jason leaned forward, his jaw tight. So what, Dennis? What is your plan? You want us homeless? You want your grandson pulled out of school? You want to watch us fall apart? Because that is what is going to happen. And when it does, it will be on your conscience. I leaned back in my chair and let the weight of his words hang in the air before answering. No, Jason. When it happens, it will be on yours. I already carried you longer than I should have. I already gave more than any man should have to give. I am done. Emily broke then, her sobs turning into frantic words, her voice raw and desperate. Dad, please do not say that. We cannot lose the house. We cannot. The bank already warned us that if another payment is missed, foreclosure will start. Dad, please, we will lose everything. We will lose the house. The words tumbled out of Emily's mouth in sobs, raw and desperate, her hands clutching the edge of the coffee table like it could anchor her against the tide of fear. For a moment, I simply watched her. My daughter, who had once clutched my hand in grocery stores and run barefoot through the backyard while Maria called her inside for dinner. I saw her then not as the woman who had betrayed me, but as the little girl who had always believed her father would fix everything. And it struck me with final clarity. This was the problem. I had never allowed her to face the storm without me, never let her stumble, never let her learn what real responsibility felt like. And now, grown with a family of her own, she still stood in front of me like a child asking to be rescued. Jason shifted beside her, his face tight with anger, his fists clenched against his knees. Do not listen to this, he spat. He is doing this to punish us. He is trying to make us crawl back. He wants control. That is all this is. His eyes burned into mine, filled with hate. But I did not look away. For the first time, he was the one who blinked first. Jason, I said evenly, you have lived in denial for too long. You built your pride on my money, and now you are angry that the foundation is gone. That is not punishment. That is reality. I am not doing this to make you crawl. I am doing this because I should have stopped years ago. If you cannot provide for your family, that is not my failure. That is yours." Emily shook her head, tears streaming. "Dad, please, you do not understand. The bank is already sending notices. If you stop, if you do not reinstate the payments, we are going to lose everything. We cannot make it without you." I leaned forward, my voice steady, low, every word deliberate. "And that, Emily, is the point. You cannot make it without me because you chose not to learn how. I taught you hard work. I showed you sacrifice. But somewhere along the way, you and Jason convinced yourselves that those lessons were optional as long as I was there. Well, I am not there anymore. You will have to learn now, the way I did, the way your mother did. I cannot carry you any longer." For a moment, the only sound in the room was Emily's quiet sobbing and the tick of the clock. Then Jason stood abruptly, his hands shaking with rage. "You think you are better than us because you have money? Fine, keep it. We will figure it out without you. But do not expect us to come crawling back. You are dead to me, Dennis. Dead." He grabbed his coat and stormed out, the door slamming behind him, leaving Emily crumpled on my couch. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders heaving, her voice muffled. "Dad, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I should never have said those things to you. I should never have pushed you away. Please, I did not mean it. I was wrong." Her apology cut deeper than Jason's insults ever could, because I could hear the truth in it. For the first time, Emily was not speaking like a daughter entitled to my sacrifice. She was speaking like a woman who had finally realized what she had done. I reached across the table and laid a hand gently on hers. "Emily," I said softly, "I love you. I always have. But love does not mean I keep destroying myself to save you. Love means I tell you the truth, even when it hurts. And the truth is, you need to learn how to stand on your own. I will not put the chains back on. I will not carry your mortgage, your bills, your life anymore. If you want to rebuild, you and Jason will have to do it yourselves." She lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes searching mine. And for the first time in years, I saw something that looked like humility. Not anger, not entitlement, but the dawning realization that her choices had consequences. She nodded slowly, broken but understanding, and whispered, "I understand, Dad. I really do. I do not know if we can make it." "You will," I said, "or you will not. But either way, it will be because of your own strength, not mine. That is how it should have been all along." She cried quietly for a while longer, then finally stood, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. She looked smaller than she ever had, her shoulders slumped, her voice low. "I do not know if Jason will forgive me for coming here. But I had to. I needed you to know I am sorry. I do not expect you to fix this. I just needed you to know." I nodded, my heart heavy but clear. "I know, Emily, and I forgive you. But forgiveness does not mean things go back the way they were. That part of our lives is over." She nodded again, then walked slowly to the door. I watched her step into the cold night, her borrowed car waiting at the curb, her figure hunched against the wind. For the first time, she looked like someone who understood the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. For the first time, I believed she might actually learn to carry it. When the door closed, the silence in my house was different than it had been on that first night. It was no longer the silence of humiliation or loneliness. It was the silence of freedom, of peace reclaimed after years of sacrifice, wasted on people who never valued it. I sat back down in my chair and let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. For the first time in decades, I felt light. Thanksgiving had once been about family, about gathering together and giving thanks. For years, that meaning had been twisted into obligation, into me pouring myself out while receiving nothing but dismissal in return. But now, at last, Thanksgiving had returned to me. It meant gratitude again, not theirs, but mine. Gratitude for the strength to finally let go. Gratitude for the peace I had reclaimed. Gratitude for the freedom to live the rest of my life on my own terms. I looked around my quiet home, the walls lined with photographs of Maria, the memories of the life we had built together still warm in their frames. I raised my glass of water, toasting the empty room, toasting her memory, toasting myself. Thanksgiving finally meant gratitude again. But this time, it was mine. If you liked this story, subscribe and tell us about your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next one, click on the box on the screen.